All right, let's bring in Darren Dreger today. Stanley Cup Final rematch is a big one tonight. Oilers and the Florida Panthers. The Oilers roll in playing their best hockey of the year, getting by Vegas on Saturday as well. Dregs, I don't think really many teams could be playing better than the Oilers are playing right now.
Right, and I'm okay with setting up the rematch of this game, even though it's just relatively early. Game 31 of the NHL regular season. I mean, it's the first glimpse since looking back at the disappointment of Game 7. And, I guess there's a different level of investment when you're playing or you're coaching or you're managing. But, there isn't a team in the league that doesn't want to be measured against the best. And until the Stanley Cup is awarded to someone else, the Florida Panthers are the defending Stanley Cup champions. They are the best. So I think that there's at least a piece, maybe not a pound, a piece of flesh that could be, pulled away by the Oilers based on the way they're playing. And, you mentioned the Vegas Golden Knights game. Well, that's a big win. The win over Minnesota, big win. Tampa Bay is no slouch in the Eastern Conference. So the fact that the Oilers are riding a 5-game winning streak, they're 8-2 in their last 10. And as the players have talked about, it seems like everybody's kind of embracing and fitting into their role, whatever that is with this club. I think that's an excellent sign. And then of course you get a little bit of the pushback in the mind games from Florida Panthers head coach Paul Maurice, who talks about their rush defense being absent or AWOL, whatever the word was that he used. And, if that doesn't clean up, then the Oilers are going to put up 15 on the Florida Panthers. All right. I mean, that reminds me of Keith Tkachuk, of course, the dad of Matthew and Brady, coming out a couple of years ago and accusing his kids of trying to take autographs playing against the Toronto Maple Leafs as opposed to playing the game the way he needed. I mean, it's just ridiculous fodder to try and get his team back on track. So all signs indicate that this should be a hell of a hockey game.
Darren, what can you tell us about the Panthers shutout in back-to-backs here out in the West, Vancouver and Calgary? It will be an ornery Cats squad, no doubt. And again, the rematch, all these things. The Oilers, I'm sure, will be very frisky to kind of get on top of them as they've passed all these other 3 tests. And you mentioned the Lightning, Wild, and Golden Knights. But has it just been as simple as them running into some hot goaltending, or a little more from the Panthers side that they need to correct and Paul Maurice needs to go in and dig and find out answers?
Well, he would say that there's a lot more going on than just running into hot hockey clubs, right? And to a point, it speaks to the parity that exists around the NHL. I mean, you play the Calgary Flames. Is that a team that you should lose to? I mean, not if you're playing the way that the Florida Panthers have played, what led them to the Stanley Cup championship. Like, we used to talk about the Western Conference being that much more difficult to play in, right? A heavier style of game. Well, true or not, I mean, the Florida Panthers made their way to hoisting that Stanley Cup because of the hard areas that they invested in, right? Hard on the forecheck. Physically punishing at times. They would just wear you down. Again, you've got that now infamous clip from Paul Maurice yelling at his players on the bench, pound their D so that they have nothing left in Game 7, right? Well, that's kind of the identity of the Florida Panthers. And I don't think that they've played that way on a consistent basis. And then you talk about some of the other lapses in their game. He talks about them failing to generate any speed to get anything offensively going on the rush. Well, there's an area of concern. Again, we established a rush defense. Well, it's not there. But look, they've got the experience and the history. This is a team that knows how to win. So they can look at the standings and see where they're at as early as it is and go, all right, we got some stuff to figure out. But we've also learned through our climb up the ladder that it is a marathon. So I don't have any deep-rooted concerns with the Florida Panthers, but if Paul Maurice is speaking openly the way that he does in acknowledging the key areas that they're not doing well right now, rest assured he's driving that message home 1,000-fold with the doors closed. So I don't think that there'll be any lack of effort in this one.
Yeah, I mean, a run to the Stanley Cup final, come up short, go to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final last year and win it. And they're 18-11-2 this year, and that includes a losing streak of like 4 or 5 games in the middle of that too. So it's really remarkable what they've done the last 3 years. I want to get to the Cam Fowler trade as St. Louis decides to pull the trigger on Cam Fowler and a 4th rounder going for a prospect and a 2nd round pick. Some salary retention involved here. Obviously, in Edmonton, we're going to be looking at this blue line market. What does the Cam Fowler trade do to that at all, Drakes?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one for sure. It's not like Cam Fowler getting traded, took us by surprise. It didn't. I mean, his name has been out there for a while, but I give Pat Verbeek some credit here. Now, those 2 trades make a little bit more sense, don't they? In, the Anaheim Ducks acquiring Jacob Trouba from the New York Rangers in a muscle move, not by Anaheim per se, but by Chris Drury and the New York Rangers to create cap space there. And I think we all wondered at the time, well, we kind of have a pretty good idea where Anaheim is and why would they be in on Jacob Trouba? Why would they want that level of experience given where they're at? Well, I mean, it's clear to backfill, right? And they feel like that's a more manageable contract, I guess, moving forward. And I would believe that Pat Verbeek, would have had the Cam Fowler thing kind of tucked away and knew what the level of interest was in him. So this just tells me that Verbeek and the Anaheim Ducks are wide open for business. But I thought that Fowler would drift into the second half of the year, if not closer to the trade deadline. So I guess, again, just backtracking here, for all the reasons that we've talked about, but including the fact that Fowler's name had been out there for an extended period of time, Pat Verbeek must have recognized that, look, why am I waiting here? It's probably not going to get better than what we're getting in return, so let's make the move.
TSN's Darren Dreger here on the Nielsen Show, Edmonton Sports Talk. Darren, I just wanted your thoughts. It's kind of funny times in Buffalo with the football team tracking as they are right now, and a big one yesterday in Detroit, and the hockey team really not being able to get out of their way. 10 in a row now for the Sabres. It does seem like ownership and management more concerned about inflatable palm trees being brought to the game. Can you just let us know what in the hell's going on there? And I know a listener or viewer wanted to know whether a coaching change happens first with the Rangers or the Sabres. And I think you can get two-pronged. Deal with the Sabres first, then maybe with the Rangers if you will. But what's going on in Buffalo and what happens next?
Well, I mean, Kevin Adams clearly is trying to make a trade. He acknowledged just over a week ago to the media there that, he's interested in making a trade, but he's not going to do anything dumb through panic. And because of where they're at now, again, after that loss to Toronto, that's 10 in a row, he's not getting calls from rival general managers trying to help him out. He's getting calls from rival GMs, interested GMs, looking at young pieces, looking at Bo Byram, looking at Jack Quinn, who was a healthy scratch for 5 straight games. And he comes in the lineup against the Leafs and scores 2 goals and had a pretty nice game. But they just can't pull it all together at the same time. You couldn't have designed a better start in Toronto than what Buffalo mustered in that one late yesterday afternoon. It's 2-0 in the first period, and you're looking at the Leafs going, oh boy. Yeah, I know Dennis Hildeby was in net, called up from the American Hockey League, but still another slow start by the Leafs. And maybe this is exactly, a rivalry between Buffalo and Toronto was exactly what the Sabres needed, but it didn't work out that way. They folded in the second period, couldn't get anything going in the third, and the Maple Leafs come back and steal a win. So, I can't imagine that Adams has another coach firing in him. I don't think many would have favored him getting rid of Donnie Granato in the fashion that he did. But we made sense of it by acknowledging, okay, Lindy Ruff is a familiar name, an experienced guy, somebody that Kevin Adams had a deep appreciation for, connection with. Likewise with Terry Pegula, the owner of the Buffalo Sabres. So they make that move, and it just hasn't panned out. So, eventually the general manager is going to run out of runway, and I think that that's where he's at. So we'll see. I mean, he's still looking for a trade. In New York, more complicated. So Capo Kakko is the healthy scratch, and now that gets the radar up, but Kakko's name has been out there for a while. The problem with him is, how do you get fair value back for a second pick overall? He's not delivering offensively. He certainly doesn't have the trust of Peter Laviolette. And I feel for the young guy because I've watched him play internationally, and he's a different player when he's playing for Finland in international events than he is playing for the New York Rangers. It's a hard one to explain. There's lots of interest in Kakko. I believe he's got more offense in him. this might be one where Chris Drury is just simply going to have to go, all right, I'm going to have to package him as part of something else. But otherwise, they're not going to get what they expect in return. But that entire group, even though they tried to claw back down from 3-0 to the St. Louis Blues, they lose 3-2. They look disconnected, disjointed, disinterested, dis or dat. That's what the New York Rangers are, to steal a phrase from Martin Biron. So we're all kind of waiting for what's happening next in Manhattan.
Look, last one for you, Dregs, here, then we'll let you go. And I just, Buffalo has been awful. They cannot find a way to win. They haven't won in over 3 weeks. They're still a point better than the Montreal Canadiens in the standings right now. I'm sure that's not being received well in Montreal, and I know they're a team that I still think has a long way to go, and maybe you're okay with where you are in the standings. But what has to happen there?
Well, they're not okay with where they're at in the standings, but less about the reality of where they're at and how they got there, right? Like, this is a team that knows where they're at. They didn't expect to be a playoff team this year. What they expected was that they'd be in the playoff conversation. And how interesting would it be if the Montreal Canadiens found a way to claw back into that conversation? And then you get to, mid-70s of the regular season and you're still fighting for it, and the market is competitive and the fans can see what's coming, and then you have to make the step in 25-26. And that's been the focus of ownership and management of the Montreal Canadiens. The disappointing parts, let's start with, again, we just talked about Kaplikako and the New York Rangers. Well, Juraj Slafkovsky looked last year like he had turned the corner. Like, this guy was headed to be a star in the NHL. I don't know what's going on with him. I don't believe he's hampered by anything or is playing with anything nagging. I mean, players play through stuff. I mean, that's just the rigors of playing in the league. He looks slower to me, and he doesn't look as engaged as he did last year. And then you look at Kirby Dach, who they felt after an extensive injury coming into this year healthy, he was really going to give them an extra pop. Alex Newhook coming off injury, again, would give them a little bit more. Just the development of their young guys. And the pieces just don't fit into what is the puzzle. So, Kent Hughes is another general manager that is certainly making calls. He's listening. But again, keenly aware, despite what market pressure might be there, where this organization is at. So I do think that they're willing to do something, but not at the expense of any of their young players, be it up front or on the blue line, unless there's a player that they just don't believe in as a solution for part of their future.
Dregs, as always, man, we appreciate the time. Thanks a lot.
Hey, guys, have a great week.